Hey everyone, welcome to another top 10 list. I've got my newest top 10 list. This is the top 10 most controversial notes. That was requested by Lady Kid Nichols. Lady Kid Nichols was watching one of my other videos and saw me talking about one of the particular notes in that list and said, hey, what other ones are there? So I decided I'd put together the top 10 list of controversial notes. This is Lady Kid Nichols' page. She does auctions, she does live streams. Check her out. Very entertaining channel. Her and her husband do an incredible job. So after you're done checking me out here, make sure to check out Lady Kid Nichols and be sure to thank her for the suggestion. So I've got her up front here. Let's take a look at the top 10 most controversial notes. I do not have the story for every single note out there, but as I started going through trying to figure out what would be considered controversial, I started pulling out note after note, and before you know it, I had to narrow it down. So I did manage to squeeze it down to my top 10. Number 10, I've got this raggy old piece of paper that doesn't look like much. Looks like a newspaper scrap that somebody should have thrown away a long time ago. And, well, maybe so, unless you zoom in right there and see that this is a $50 from 1770. This outdates our own country. 1776, of course, the Declaration of Independence. That means we were just the colonies. So this is considered colonial currency. Colonial meaning colonies, money put out by the colonies themselves. Now, while we were under England's rule, putting out our own currency was pretty controversial. I'm sure they wanted us to use their stuff. So by us doing this, I'm sure they had a feeling that more was coming. 1770 colonial currency, oldest piece I've got in my collection. That's number 10. Number 9, slightly newer, and by slightly just, this is from 1779, just after the Declaration of Independence. This particular note, well, I should go back to this one here for a second. This one, being colonial currency, was actually from the colony of Maryland. Each colony did put up their own type of currency, hand-numbered, hand-signed, etc. But that's number 10. We're talking about number 9. Number 9 is after the Declaration of Independence, where instead of colonial currency, you had what was called continental currency. Our Continental Congress put together the Continental Army and had to fund it, so we had continental currency. This would be where it would say right across the top, for the first time, United States. The United States, a hand-numbered bill. This particular one is for $50. You can see the date, 14th of January, 1779. Hand-signed, of course. And they used an impression of leaves to make it harder to counterfeit. I did a whole video on this particular one. But when you talk about controversy, yeah. This particular note, I'm sure, inflamed the English troops and England itself. And the inflation problem set in. That's why you've got such a high valued note here at $50. But that would be number 9 on my list of controversial notes. Number 8. Not particularly this exact note, but this type of note. This here is my $1,000 bill. I've had this out in a couple different videos. The high denomination notes, the $500 bill, the $1,000 bill, the $5,000, the $10,000, the higher denomination notes have been extremely controversial because they were removed from circulation starting in 1969. Now, it's odd that those bills are removed from circulation because when they were allowed in circulation, they didn't really seem to be needed. I don't know what somebody was doing with $1,000 in 1934. This here is my 1934A. But I've seen old photos of car lots where people were selling cars for $25. So you could take this bill and basically buy every car in the lot. So yeah, apparently there was a use for this in 1934. And apparently now, when this may not cover most people's rent for a month, we don't have a use for it now. It seems kind of silly to me that we don't have this. I guess people were worried about counterfeiting. People were worried about large sums of untraceable money. Or there's reasons why it was taken out of play. But something even as simple as a $5 or a $500 bill would see a lot of use. So yeah, it was controversial to have this note, and now you can't. They're still spendable, but they're not making any more. So if you have one and spent it, you're a loss. Take a quick peek at the back of this one. I did do a video on this one as well, so it's not the first time that this one has made its appearance. That's number 8 on my list. Not necessarily the 1,000, but any of the large denomination notes. 10, 9, 8. Number 7 on the list. This is an unusual note. This particular note, United States Silver Certificate, you can see this is from 1886. 1886, this particular note is known as the Tombstone Note. Now, most people will tell you it's the Tombstone Note because this image, rather than being a circle or an oval or anything else, looks like an old style tombstone. Well, it turns out that this particular note has that for a reason. This particular note, if I remember correctly, shows Vice President Hendricks, if I remember right. We'll just double check in the book just to make sure. $10 silver certificate, right there. Showing, I want to make sure I get him right. Where is it? Illustration, here it is. Bust of Thomas A. Hendricks, Vice President of the United States from March 4th, 1885 to November 25th, 1885. He died in office. You can see right there, the portrait was engraved by Charles Schlecht, the so-called Tombstone Note. So, Vice President Thomas Hendricks died in office after a short period of time. They put him in on the $10 bill, and they did frame it in a tombstone. Quite controversial note at the time. So the Tombstone Note, 1886, depicting Vice President Hendricks. That's the back of it there. 10, 9, 8, 7. Number 6 on the list. Number 6. This is also an 1891, actually. 1891, this is a Martha Washington $1 silver certificate. Martha Washington, I believe she was the first actual woman put on a bill. There'd been engravings of women in general, but not particularly named women. So the very first time a woman appeared on a bill, right there, George Washington's wife, Martha Washington, she appeared on the $1 bill before he did. I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but it sounded good at the time. Anyway, first woman on a bill, Martha Washington. That could cause a little bit of controversy, especially when you've got presidents, senators, generals. Here's just the very first lady. So that definitely makes the list as one of the more controversial notes, and hopefully we'll get to see some more women on bills soon. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Number 5. Number 5. This is a $100 bill from the Confederate States of America. This is the real deal. You can see it's hand numbered, hand signed. Very interesting note here when you think about what was going on in our country at the time and what this note represented. One of the interesting things about this note is what it says right here. 6 months after, well, let's back it up. This particular note was supposed to be, here, the Confederate States of America will pay to the bearer on demand $100 with interest at 2 cents per day. And then you read the fine print. 6 months after the ratification of a peace between the Confederate States and the United States. Which means as the war lingered on, everybody knew that the Confederate money wasn't going to be worth anything unless the Confederate States won. And with that hope dwindling, inflation set in because people knew these would never be able to be cashed out for anything. So it's interesting that they put that on there, but as most legal documents go, most people don't read the fine print. So that is, I believe this is the 1862 right there, 1862, October 1862, $100 bill from the Confederate States of America. Next up, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, number 4 on the list. Number 4 is my 1907 $10 legal tender. This is the Bison note. The Bison note, kind of controversial because you've got two explorers. You guys have heard of Lewis and Clark. Well, there they are. They were actually on our money. Lewis and Clark, when they went across country with Sacagawea, if I recall. That I do not believe is her on the back. They didn't put her on here, which could cause some controversy. That and the fact that the central figure is a buffalo. It's not a buffalo, actually. It's a bison. There are no buffalo in North America. The North American buffalo is actually the North American bison. Buffalo are in Africa. This is a bison. And the herds of bison across the Great Plains, they decided to put the bison on the $10 bill in between Lewis and Clark. Not exactly what you'd expect to find on our money. Definitely caused a little bit of controversy seeing something like this when you first opened your wallet. Imagine this is what you got the very first time it was ever issued when you went to the bank and got a $10 bill. Definitely a shocking and controversial talked about note, having Lewis and Clark and the North American bison. Not exactly what you'd think for an American currency. Number 3 on my list. When it comes to controversial notes, when it comes to really cool notes, I'm a big fan of the 1899 $5 bill. This is known as the Chief note, and what makes this one so controversial, some people were upset that it showed a Native American on it at the time. Everything seems appropriate nowadays, but at the time it didn't seem like that was appropriate to do, which made it a little controversial. But they got this chief, Chief Unkpapa was his name. He was part of the Sioux Nation. And if I recall correctly, when they had him pose for this portrait that was being done, they gave him a rival tribe's war. What do you call it? The rival tribe's feathers. So that caused a huge problem when this was being rendered. The chief was not happy about having the wrong tribe's headdress on there, and he wasn't going to sit for the photo. If he sat with it and wearing it, I don't know, or if they just drew it on after the fact. That was a huge controversy at the time. So having first and foremost a Native American on the bill in 1899 was hugely controversial. Second of all, being a mishmash of two different tribes caused controversy with the tribes themselves. So that's number 3 on my list. Number 2. One of the more infamous notes you're going to find, $10 legal tender. This $10 legal tender is from 1869. They do have newer versions as well that don't run quite as much. And this particular bill has this interesting picture of an eagle on it. You can see the picture of the eagle right there. But what makes this note so controversial is when you take this note and you flip it around. That eagle suddenly becomes a jackass, a donkey. You can see its white muzzle. You can see the white muzzle, you can see its eye, you can see its ear sticking up, you can look closely and see the mane all along the back there. Yep, this is the jackass note. Don't know if it was done on purpose or on accident, but there it is. It was done. Definitely one of the more controversial notes. It's a larger denomination note, so not everybody had these. So when you think about it, very few people knew the existence of this at the time. So it could have been done as an inside joke. Nobody would seem to know. But yeah, this one would be number 2 on my list, the $10 jackass note. And finally, number 1 on my list, the troublemaker note, the note that caused an entire series to be removed after only 3 years. This is the $5 1896 silver certificate. $5 1896 silver certificate. This was the troublemaker note of the educational series. The government wanted to make paper money help educate the public. The $1 bill was about history, the $2 bill was about science and technology, and the $5 bill was about electricity. You can see the lightning bolt here. However, they used this angelic figure in the center and didn't put any clothes on her. And the people said, we will not have pornography in our pockets. And they demanded that the educational series be removed. Looking at this bill, it's amazing that this was our currency at one point, because this is just insanely incredible. But then for the controversy and for them to have to yank out all of the ones, twos, and fives in circulation, they were able to do that by 1899. They had all the notes replaced. So this was only out there for 3 years, and it is definitely the most controversial note in existence in our currency, at least in my opinion. All right, guys, that's what I've got for my top 10 list of controversial notes. If you agree with my list, hit that like button. If you think I missed one, I may have. I don't know at all. So if you know of a note that should be on that list, please leave a comment. And Lady Kid Nichols, thank you very much for suggesting this list. It was fun to put it together. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it, and I'll talk to you guys next week.